This is another great birth story episode, and it is brought to you today by Lancino. Welcome to the All About Pregnancy and Birth podcast. I'm Dr. Nicole Calloway Rankins, a board-certified OBGYN who's been in practice for nearly 15 years. I've had the privilege of helping over 1,000 babies into this world, and I'm here to help you be calm, confident, and empowered to have a beautiful pregnancy and birth. Quick note, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for medical advice. Check out the full disclaimer at drnicolerankins.com/disclaimer. Now let's get to it. Hey there, before we dive into the episode, the Birth with Power Pathway launches in May. And if you're getting ready for your hospital birth, you don't want to miss it. It's the updated version of my online birth course designed to get you calm, confident, and empowered. Hop on my email list now at drnicolerankins.com/email to be the first to know when it's live. Hello. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. This is episode number 151. Thank you for being here with me today. So in today's birth story episode, we have Brittany. Brittany is a first-time mom who lives in Denver, Colorado, and her son was born in March of last year. Brittany was induced at 39 weeks, 4 days by her own choice. She ended up experiencing a longer labor. She labored for over 36 hours, ran into a little bit of a complication where she had a placenta abruption, and that ended in an unplanned C-section. So we're going to hear all of the details of that today. Now, Brittany reached out to share her story because, one, as a woman of color, she wanted to share how she was able to advocate for herself, but also remain flexible throughout the process. And number two, she wanted to share that thanks to the birth preparation course, she felt fully prepared, she felt knowledgeable, she felt informed of everything about the labor process, and she really learned how to advocate for herself, especially as a Black woman. Now, I have to be honest, it brings me both joy and also makes my heart go pitter patter in a nervous way to talk to members of the birth preparation course. Now, of course, it brings me joy because I love hearing the feedback that people say that they found the information helpful. They were ready for the things that came their way. All of the lovely things that folks say after they go through the course and have their birth. But it gives me a little bit of nervous pitter patter because I really wish that I can guarantee a specific outcome for everyone after going through the course. I wish I could guarantee that oh, you'll have that unmedicated birth, or, oh, you'll have a short labor and everything will go smooth and straightforward. I wish I could guarantee things with the course, a specific thing that'll happen. I can't guarantee that. Actually, no childbirth education can guarantee that. So if you hear anybody say that, they're lying. You can't guarantee anything with birth because it's unpredictable. But what I can 100% guarantee is that you will have all of the knowledge and information that you need so that you will understand what's happening during labor. You'll understand what's happening during birth. You'll be able to advocate for the things that are important to you. You'll know what questions to ask. You will be fully prepared. You will be ready. You will be calm, confident, and empowered, going into your birth. So that I can guarantee 100%. So check out all the details of the birth preparation course at drnicolerankins.com/enroll. Now, another thing that I want you to check out is the postpartum care line from this episode's sponsor, Lancino. I recently partnered with Lancino on a series of educational videos that goes along with their postpartum care line. And the postpartum care line is called Birth Prep and Recovery Products. It includes things like an upside down postpartum wash bottle, hot and cold therapy packs, which I really love those, postpartum sprays, and more. I have put my hands on all of these items and they are truly fantastic. I can say that with 100% confidence. I especially love the hot and cold therapy packs. They feel really good, whether they're cold or whether they're hot, and you can reuse them. So I'm excited to share all of those products with you today. And you can learn more about them at lancino.com/AAPB. That is Lancino, LANSINOH NICU.com/AAPB. And that link will be in the show notes. All right, let's get into the birth story conversation with Brittany. Thank you so much, Brittany, for agreeing to come onto the podcast. I'm super excited to have you here and talk about your birth story.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us a bit about yourself and your family?
Sure. I have lived in the Denver metro area most of my life. I've worked in the education field for about 10 years now. I have been married for about 2.5 years to my husband, Akeem. We've been together for 6 years, and we have one son who is 8 months old, and his name is Isa.
Love it, love it, love it. I love his name. And
Thank you.
Yeah, and this is so terrible of me, but I'm like, I feel like I don't know any Black people from Colorado. Like it's that's so bad. Is that
No, it's not bad. I'm originally from Dallas, actually.
Okay.
But I moved here as a kid, so.
Got it. But it's a really beautiful area.
It is.
And I know like the skiing and things like that are lovely. But
I've heard. I've never skied, but
okay.
I've heard it's good.
Gotcha. All right. So why don't we start off by talking about what your pregnancy and prenatal care was like, because we have to understand, I think, what that's like in order to talk about your birth. So what was your pregnancy and prenatal care like?
My pregnancy, I would say, was pretty uneventful. I had the typical nausea, morning sickness until about 14 weeks, so just shy after my first trimester. I did have a random fainting spell at Target, which was embarrassing. I just didn't eat enough that day.
Did they call 911?
They did not, no,
Okay,
but they were like running to get me snacks and water, and my husband caught me on my way down, so that was good.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. But yeah, I would say really tired, a lot of heartburn.
Gotcha.
Were the main symptoms I had.
Okay. So nothing terribly out of the ordinary.
No,
And how did you feel about the care you received? Were you seeing a physician or a midwife?
I saw a physician. I went to a practice that had a team of OBs. I purposely picked an OB who was a minority. I don't know. I feel like that's kind of bad to say.
No, I think it's very common that you want to pick people who you feel like you can relate to. And that's often one of the things that you feel like you can relate to.
Right. There's not a lot of Black doctors, at least in my area. So I just found someone, that I thought would be able to relate on a certain level.
Gotcha.
I also had a birth doula. So that was something that was really important to me also, that I talked to while I was pregnant up until labor and delivery.
Okay, nice. And do you feel like you had a good relationship with your OB?
I did, yeah. Anytime I was worried, if my son wasn't super like moving a lot that day, I would call and she would have me come in and check. I feel like she was really good about easing my worries. She never dismissed like any kind of type of concerns I had. So
nice. And that is always very, very important. And then, I've always been embarrassed to say, like, I didn't realize that people, when they have a doula, that, that's actually a relationship that starts prenatally. I don't know why I thought they just like roll up during the birth. That's not true at all. So, do you feel like having a doula available also as well during your pregnancy was helpful?
Yes, I would say I highly recommend it if you're giving birth for the first time. Even second or third time, I would probably have one again, just to have another person to really advocate for you and just, check up on you, because, OBs are very busy. So it was very nice to have that extra person. Nice.
So what did you do to prepare for your birth?
I originally, my husband and I took the hospital birth course that they provide. It was, I was pregnant like a few months after COVID started, so it was virtual. We found it to be very sterile. So I actually had heard of your course through my husband's coworker. So we ended up not going to that one and just taking yours.
Yay!
Yeah.
Yay. So, and hopefully your experience in the course was good.
Yes, it was good. It was great.
And did you go through the course with your husband too?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. And did he say, I mean, you can be honest, but hopefully he found it helpful as well.
I think he found it helpful. I feel like there's a lot that both of us might have forgotten. But it was nice to know, like, we knew a lot of the terminology when I was going into labor. So it was definitely good not to be clueless.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are some things that you wanted for your birth?
Originally I wanted a natural birth. I know a lot of people say that. But I was definitely open to any type of methods of pain management. Just trying to give myself a lot of flexibility and a lot of grace, because I know that labor often goes not the way you want it to go. So really just wanted to be open. I knew when I was pregnant, I did not want a C-section, but I ended up getting one. So
Okay.
just something that happens.
Yeah, and we'll get to that for sure. And what about any things like delayed cord clamping or skin to skin contact or any of those things? Were those things important to you also?
Yes, definitely wanted the delayed cord clamping, the skin to skin, that golden hour were some things that were really important to me.
Yeah. And did you talk about any of this with your physician at all?
Yes, I had a birth plan. I shared it with my OB, with my doula, with my husband. Just everyone that was present knew exactly what I wanted.
Nice. And was she receptive to that, or how did she take that?
I think she took it really well. She never pressured me about, like doing a C-section like early on, or I just felt really, I'm not sure what the exact word I'm looking for is.
Yeah, maybe supported. Maybe?
Yeah. I never felt pressured to do anything I didn't want to do. I felt like, there was consent, which was great.
Got it. Which is important, and that's how it should be. So yeah. So ultimately, if I read correctly, you decided to be induced. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah. So what led to that decision?
So it was 2 days before my due date. I had a couple of false alarms before, with just like lack of movement. And so we had gone into the ER a couple times the last few weeks of my pregnancy, and just, baby was fine. Everything was fine. I got sent home, which was great. But the 2 days before, I'm assuming what I had was a high leak.
Okay.
But I thought my water had broke. And so I called and they said to come in, and check it out. But when they tested the fluid, they weren't really able to figure out what it was, but it definitely wasn't amniotic fluid. So they were like, hey, your water didn't break. You could probably just go home. So at that point, I was super defeated. I was very over being pregnant.
Right.
I had scheduled to be induced a few days after my due date, just because I know the risks of delivering, past 41 weeks. I just was getting a little nervous.
Sure.
So my doctor had came in a few minutes later and was like, hey, like, if you want to, totally up to you, you can get induced today. You can talk about it with your husband and just let me know. And so we decided we were already there. So we were going to stay. There was a big snowstorm in Colorado those few days. So we were like, that's great. We could stay, through the snowstorm and have a baby.
Gotcha. So she was just like, you're here, I'm here. We can make this work. Okay. So then what was your induction, labor, and birth like?
So it was very slow. When I would get those checks before I went into labor, I think I was 1 centimeter dilated and not effaced at all. So really nothing was happening. I ended up taking, I think it's Cytotec.
Yep.
So I took that to kind of get things started. It had been a few hours, and still barely dilated. My cervix was not effaced at all. So then a few hours later, we started Pitocin.
Okay.
So that kind of ramped things up a little bit in regards to like contractions. I was starting to feel contractions a lot more frequently, and ended up getting to around like 3 or 4 centimeters.
Okay. So about how long did that take to get to 3 to 4 centimeters?
I would say probably like 6 hours. I want to say it didn't take too long. It felt like a long time, but but it wasn't too bad.
Gotcha.
So I was starting to feel contractions. I think Pitocin, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it makes your contractions stronger.
Yes, I think it does.
Intense,
people, some OBs will argue with me on this, but I legitimately think that Pitocin contractions are more intense than contractions that are not from Pitocin. So yes.
Okay. So definitely was having contractions every, I think, 3 minutes. So I went and got in the tub. That's something I wanted to do. That was on my birth plan, just to ease being uncomfortable. So we did that for a while. I used the peanut ball also, just to try to get things moving. It had been several hours after that. I want to say I went in and we got induced around 1 p.m. And by the time all that had happened, it was probably like 9 at night.
Okay.
Still was at 4 centimeters. Wasn't really doing anything. One of the nurses, I think there was a switch in shifts, and one of the nurses was like, "Hey, I just want to let you know, like, you're bleeding a little bit more than you should be. We're just going to monitor it closely and, keep you updated. Let us know if you feel funky, anything like that." So that was a concern. Went into the next day and was still at about 3 or 4 centimeters. No changes.
Okay. How are you feeling mentally at that point?
Pretty drained. I was nervous about the blood loss. A few hours after I talked to that nurse, another one came in and they hooked me up on an IV to have a blood transfusion just in case, if I needed it and it was emergency, then it would be ready to go.
Oh.
Yes. So that was a little bit alarming.
I'm sure.
Yeah. Me and my husband are looking at each other like, oh, like this isn't what we expected.
Right. And was your doula there at that point?
She was, yes.
Okay.
She was really upbeat and positive. The nurses too, like they were really great at not stressing me out, which was really nice. But just kind of stalled at 4 centimeters. I continued, the Pitocin, I want to say for 24 hours, maybe a little bit more.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Did at any point did they talk about breaking your water?
They thought it broke, and then it broke. I want to say after they did started the Pitocin, then it broke.
Okay.
Forgot about that part.
Yeah.
Yeah. So really, just after that point, it was just I was stalled at 4 centimeters. Nothing was really happening. They were increasing the Pitocin, so I was getting more and more uncomfortable. And in pain. They were still monitoring my blood loss, so it was still an issue, but not enough of an issue to, make any decisions.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And then, so you were on Pitocin for 24 hours. During that time, was your doctor like, hey, at some point, was there any pressure or talk about C-section, or was it just like, oh, we just need to keep going?
Nope, no pressure. That was something that I know I've heard birth stories where, like, they talk about C-section really early. So never talked about it for a while, actually. So we're stalled. I was getting more and more uncomfortable. They were doing the Pitocin. and increasing it. And I was getting really uncomfortable. And at that point, I was like, hey, let's just do an epidural so I can get some sleep and try to relax. Because at that point, I was feeling really defeated. They would do the checks, and I was still at 4 centimeters and just not going anywhere. So that was frustrating. But once I got the epidural, like I felt a lot better. I would say shortly after that, they were getting more and more concerned about blood loss.
Okay.
And at that point, my son was in distress. He wasn't getting oxygen or nutrients from my placenta like he was supposed to.
And they were noticing that on the heart rate tracing?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So my doctor had come in and she was like, hey, I think what's going on is you're having a placental abruption. Mm-hmm. So that would make sense, for the blood loss and for, my son who's now in distress.
Yeah. And for the listeners, an abruption is when the placenta separates away from the wall of the uterus early. So that's a process that normally happens after the baby is born. It's a natural part. It has to separate eventually. But if it separates during labor, then depending on how much of it separates, then it can start to affect the baby being able to get blood supply and oxygen and things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's pretty rare too. So I was surprised.
Yeah, it's not something that happens frequently. That is true. Mm-hmm. I feel like at this point, since I've been practicing for 15 years, it doesn't necessarily feel rare, but it's certainly not something that's a routine or expected part of birth for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So at that point, they told me that was happening. And so nurses just continued to monitor, my blood loss, making sure I was okay, making sure my son was okay. They still didn't really mention anything about C-section. I think I was the one that mentioned it first. It was like, hey, maybe this is a problem, like maybe I should have a C-section, like I'm continuing to lose blood. And so they were like, let's keep monitoring you for the next, hour or so. And if it's still not looking good, then, that's what we should do.
Yeah. And I know that's interesting that you say that, because it's true that if we don't necessarily have to do a C-section right away, if the baby seems to be tolerating things fine and enough of the placenta is still working, but it can be a delicate balance to decide, like, you don't want to wait until things look really, really bad before you go to C-section. And often, sometimes labor, oddly enough, speeds up after a placenta abruption. So that may be part of the reason why they wanted to wait as well. So
right.
Yeah. So then how did you ultimately end up coming to the decision of C-section?
Well, things actually went a little bit sideways very quickly. Okay. My son was just getting worse. And he was trying to come through my birth canal, but his head was getting really swollen, and it just wasn't. He was really stressed, so it kind of turned into like, we need to do a C-section like as soon as possible.
Okay.
Make sure that I'm safe and that he's safe as well.
Gotcha. So, what point in time was that from when you first brought up, like, do we need to think about C-section?
That was probably about an hour and a half later.
Okay. Okay. And then they came back to you and said, yes, yes. Now it's time.
Yeah. Like, we got to do this in 20 minutes. At that point, it was the following day at midnight. So I guess, the following day at midnight. So I guess our second day in the hospital.
So you had been like 36 hours into it, at least, maybe longer. Yeah. So how did you feel when they were like, let's go ahead and do a C-section?
I felt relieved, but also a little bit scared. I think I was more scared of the recovery from a C-section than the actual C-section.
Gotcha.
Before they had woke me up to tell me, like, hey, you're getting a C-section, and my poor husband was sleeping also since it was the middle of the night.
Right.
So they kind of woke him up and handed him some scrubs and were like, it's time to go. It's like not a way to wake up.
Gotcha.
So 20 minutes later, he was here. It was very fast.
Okay. So there must have been some acute changes in the way the heart rate
Hmm.
looked for them to suddenly say, let's just go ahead and do this now. Do you know how dilated you had gotten to? Not that it matters, but
Still a 4.
okay.
Yeah. No changes.
Gotcha. So then what was the C-section itself like for you?
I would say it was very like out of body experience. Like I felt like I was watching myself get a C-section.
Mm,
That makes sense. It was
mm.
very weird. I mean, I felt a lot of pressure. I didn't feel any pain, mostly just pressure.
Yeah, and it's definitely, as someone who had C-sections, it's like something's happening because you're awake and you can feel something going on down there, but like you don't have any control over your movements or anything like that. So it is sort of a weird sensation.
Yeah, it is. Like I remember feeling, this probably will sound awful to people who haven't given birth yet, but just like being pulled out of me, I can't forget how that feels.
Yeah, it's true.
It's very interesting.
and that's exactly what happens, Brittany, is that we pull
Yeah.
he pulled him out.
Yeah.
And how was he when he came out?
He was mostly good. He was having some breathing issues. So they had asked if I wanted to hold him quickly before he needed to go to the NICU. And I actually chose not to, just because at that point I was super shaky. During the C-section, I thought I was going to vomit, so I was dry heaving, like also as they were doing the procedure.
Mm-hmm.
Really just felt really awful, and I didn't want that to remember like that being the first time of me holding my son.
Oh.
So my husband ended up being the first one to hold him, which was great.
Okay.
We had our birth doula was also kind of doing a little photography also. So we've got a great picture of him in the OR.
So the birth doula was in the OR with you?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You must have given birth in a fairly progressive hospital.
Yes. They have their own birth center. They have their own doulas. There's a lot going on.
Okay.
I was surprised because I didn't think she was allowed to be in the OR, but she was there.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. And even under a situation when they were worried that the baby was in distress and they were still like, no, it's fine for her to be here.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And she was actually great. She had a C-section also that was an emergency. And so she was really helpful.
Well, that is exactly how it should be,
Mm-hmm.
actually. So when he came out, did they show him to you? Were you able to see him pretty quickly?
Yes, I saw him. I mean, he looked great. He was super cute. I saw him. That part was a little bit of a blur with just me. I was just feeling so sick, so bad.
Right.
It wasn't that like euphoric moment, that you see on like
Mm-hmm.
TV and the
Mm-hmm.
movies of like a woman giving birth. Like it was nothing like that at all. So after my husband held him for a few minutes, he needed to go straight to the NICU.
Okay.
So my husband went with our son, and then my doula stayed with me.
Okay. And also adding to it is that it was the middle of the night as well, wasn't it?
Yes, he was born, I think, at 1 a.m.
Okay.
On March 12th.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So then what was the postpartum period like for you and your son?
I would say that was probably, besides, the C-section, I would say that was probably the most difficult part for me.
What was difficult about it?
Early on, I knew I didn't want to breastfeed. I just wasn't interested. And I wanted to exclusively pump.
Mm-hmm.
So I still wanted to provide, the breast milk to my son. That was important to me. I just had no desire to breastfeed.
Gotcha.
So just started pumping immediately. And, once I was able to in the hospital, I started pumping just to get my supply going. And I definitely underestimated how hard it would be. I feel like any, way that you go, whether it's breastfeeding or pumping or formula, like all of it is difficult.
It is. And you think you're sort of kind of prepared for it until you're in it. And then it's like, Lord have mercy, this is a lot.
Right. So I pumped every 3 hours for the first 2 months. And I got to a point where I lost my supply. I think before I was getting, a good like 30 ounces a day, which was great.
Mm-hmm.
I have PCOS, so I was always told, like getting pregnant would be hard,
Gotcha.
breastfeeding would be hard, all
Right.
these, things would be hard.
Right.
So I was really fortunate for that. But all of a sudden, I just lost my supply, and I was doing anything and everything to get it back. I was power pumping, I was trying to eat a lot of oatmeal, just doing anything, that I could read up on the internet to do.
Right.
And it got to the point where I was maybe getting 6 or 7 ounces a day. And I remember at the end of every day, like however many ounces I got that day, I don't know, it just felt like worthless. Like it was depressing me so much that I knew I couldn't do it anymore. So I had to make the decision to just use formula and move them to formula.
Gotcha. And I wish that we could like give ourselves some grace around those moments. And I think as your baby gets old, and I'm sort of projecting a little bit because I went through a very similar experience. In some ways, you feel like a failure and all of this, kind of stuff. Your kids end up being fine. And they're like, they're like, I don't care. Like, you fed me. Like, I really don't care. They think my daughters are like, ooh, mommy, you breastfed us. Like, oh my God. They're that sort of age. Like, they're fine.
Right.
But in the moment, you feel like, you just wish things could have been done a little bit differently. So I hope you don't beat yourself up. I say all that to say.
I definitely did in the moment. Like the end of every day, I'd feel awful. Like I'm supposed to be able to do this. It shouldn't be this hard.
Yeah.
So once I stopped, like making that decision was hard, and I did supplement with formula in the beginning too. I wasn't, it wasn't all strictly breast milk anyway. Because I just didn't want to put that kind of pressure on myself.
Sure.
But I ended up doing it anyway. But we switched to formula, and I felt so much better.
Good.
So much better.
Good. And how long did he end up staying in the NICU?
He was there, I think, for about 7 or 8 hours, so not super long.
Okay, great. So he came out pretty quickly. And then, other than breastfeeding, did you have any other challenges, other than breastfeeding? Did you have any other challenges in the postpartum period?
Definitely. I definitely had the baby blues for that, 2-3 weeks. I was diagnosed with postpartum anxiety.
Okay.
Pretty recently, actually.
And how does that show up for you?
It's just, random, like intrusive thoughts that, something harmful is going to happen to him or to me, or I would say mostly more so centered around him, though.
Gotcha. And what are you doing to help with that?
I see a therapist about twice a month. So that has been incredibly helpful.
Good. Postpartum anxiety is so underdiagnosed. We talk a lot about postpartum depression. I think we've gotten a lot better about that, but for sure, postpartum anxiety can come into play as well.
Yeah. It was definitely rough. I think it took I still have work to do now that he's, 8 months. But I felt like I was in a fog probably until he was like 5 months. Especially with like COVID and like, we're still, a year into that at that point. And I wasn't really seeing anybody, it was just like, I'm a mom and that's all that I am.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And then do you feel like, how did you end up getting help for the postpartum anxiety? Did you just take that upon yourself, or did you get help through your doctor's office?
I took it upon myself. I had been diagnosed in the past with anxiety disorder. So I was trying to keep it on my radar, just trying to be super aware of my thoughts. So, once I started to see like it getting worse, then I found a therapist.
Gotcha. So how are you feeling now? How are you feeling today?
I feel much better.
Okay.
It's still, like some days are hard, and some days are not. But it's so much better. It's so fun to watch, watch him grow. Like, he's growing so fast. He just started crawling, which is exciting.
Right.
She's doing a lot of things. I feel like it's gone by incredibly slow, but also fast.
Yeah, for sure. And then did you return to work somewhere in there?
I did. So I worked remotely before I had him. I returned at about 8 weeks, but I was working from home.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that you didn't have to deal with childcare then?
No. So it was a great idea in my head when I was pregnant. I've been doing the childcare and working.
Oh, so you just out here doing 2 full-time jobs.
Yes. Yes. And I thought that was a good idea. Like, oh, that'll be easy. And it's not. So I've got some part-time help for my mom and my mother-in-law, which is good.
Okay. Yeah, I was good. You don't realize how it's like, it was just a little baby, but then it's like, it's more than that.
Yes.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, I'm glad to hear that things are better and you're in a good place. So then as we wrap up, what is one thing or one piece of advice that you would like to tell other women as they get ready for their birth?
I would say, just be open and flexible about labor and birth. Also to give yourself grace in this time, because it is super challenging. Mm-hmm. And then really just to advocate for yourself, if you feel like something's wrong.
100%. Well, thank you so much, Brittany, for agreeing to come onto the podcast. And thank you for allowing me to play a part in your story by taking the birth preparation course and, taking advantage of some of the resources. And I'm glad you find it helpful. And I'm glad you came back to share your story afterwards.
Thank you so much.
Wasn't that a great birth story episode? I appreciate Brittany sharing about her journey, her entire journey, actually, including some of the challenging parts, like when she had challenges with breastfeeding. When I was a breastfeeding mom, I also had challenges with breastfeeding, and products from this episode's sponsor, Lancino, were a lifesaver for me for sore nipples. Their lanolin cream was fantastic. So I am really delighted to work with Lancino now as a member of their clinical advisory board and talk about their postpartum care line, birth prep and recovery products. It has that upside down postpartum wash bottle that comes in so handy after birth, the hot and cold therapy packs, postpartum sprays, and more. I have literally touched and seen all of the products, and they truly are fantastic. And I'm so excited to share them with you today and that they're sponsoring the podcast. So you can learn more about these products at lancino.com/AAPB. That is Lancino, LANSINOH.com/AAPB. And that link will be in the show notes. All right. Now, after every episode, I do something called Nicole's Notes, where I talk about my top 3 or 4 takeaways from the episode, and a little slight change to Nicole's Notes. I am actually changing them to Dr. Nicole's Notes. And the reason that I'm doing that is because this ain't just notes and information from anybody. Okay. It's not from Nicole. It's from the doctor part. So I am putting in my 15 years of knowledge and experience, helping over 1,000 babies into this world, into the things that I give you, and the fact that I'm still practicing and that most of what I do is birth. So it's not just Nicole's Notes, it is Dr. Nicole's Notes. So let's get into Dr. Nicole's Notes after this conversation with Brittany. Number 1, I love how confident she was with her choices. She looked for a doctor who would make her feel comfortable, a woman of color. She was comfortable and confident about her choice of wanting to be induced. She was comfortable and confident about not wanting to breastfeed, but she was okay with pumping to provide breast milk for her baby. And an important part of feeling confident and comfortable with your decisions is being informed. Okay. So getting informed about things so you can make good choices, and you're making it based on good information. One of the things that will help you do that is good childbirth education. So do check out the birth preparation course, my childbirth education option, that will get you calm, confident, and empowered to make choices that work for you during your birth. Okay, number 2, I want to be clear that actually most induction is successful. I don't want you to shy away from induction and think like, oh my God, it was because of the induction that things happen. Actually, most labor inductions, roughly about 80%, are going to be successful. So do know that. And I talk about that in more detail in the birth preparation course as well. Number 3, there are a lot of great OBs and hospitals out there. You just have to find them. I love how Brittany talked about how she felt comfortable with her doctor. She didn't feel pressure about things. I love how she said they had their own doulas within their system. So they supported that model and know that it helps patients to have the best outcomes. I was actually kind of blown away by the fact that they had the doula in the operating room during the C-section. And like she was taking pictures and doing birth photography under circumstance that was actually an urgent C-section. Like a lot of places would not do that because they wouldn't want to have anybody else there during sort of an emergent situation. So that was really, really different and great, actually, that was a part of care. So there are great OBs, there are great hospitals out there. Sometimes you just have to do a little bit of work to find them. And then the final Nicole's note is, or Dr. Nicole's note, I should say, is I just want to bring attention again to postpartum anxiety. It's something that I believe I struggled with, but I didn't know it at the time. My first baby was a preemie. You know, I've talked about this on the podcast before. She was born at 32 weeks. She spent a month in the NICU. She had a rare intestinal malformation called duodenal atresia. She had surgery 3 days after birth. And I was really anxious when she came home. And I never felt depressed, but I certainly got overwhelmed with things that under normal circumstances weren't really overwhelming. Like I remember one time we were driving to the doctor's appointment in the beginning of what was like about to be a snowstorm because she had thrown up a little bit. And I just thought that like the connection in her intestines that had been fixed was clearly like coming apart. Like there was no other reason why she would be throwing up that much. That actually was not the case. But I just want to bring attention to postpartum anxiety and knowing that that's a possibility, and then reaching out to get help and resources for it, either through your doctor, a therapist, community, a combination of all of those things if needed. Okay, so there you have it. Please do me a favor, share this podcast with a friend if you like it. Sharing is caring. Also, be sure to subscribe to the podcast in Apple Podcasts or wherever you are listening to podcast. And I would love it if you leave an honest review in Apple Podcast. In particular, helps other women to find the show, helps the show to grow. And I just love hearing what you say about the podcast. Don't forget to check out the birth prep and recovery products from the episode sponsor, Lancino. They are fantastic. That's lancino.com/AAPB. So that is it for this episode. Do come on back next week. And remember that you deserve a beautiful pregnancy and birth.